The crack of that baton still echoes in my head sometimes. It wasn't just pain, it was disbelief, the kind that freezes your breath. One second I was jogging down a quiet street lined with perfect lawns. The next I was on the ground legs screaming while a cop shouted at me like I was less than human. "On the ground, you filthy animal," he said, face red, spit flying. Yeah, that happened. And as I lay there bleeding on someone's perfect driveway, I remember thinking this guy has no idea who he just hit. That morning had been an ordinary. I'm a creature of habit. Same stretch of Maple Ridge Estates, same playlist, same steady pace. Running's how I clear my head. I work cases, financial crimes, fraud, the kind of stuff that lives in spreadsheets and shell companies, and that quiet rhythm of my feet helps me think. The air was still the sun-sharp sprinklers ticking across lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happened, until I became something happening. The cruiser came out of nowhere, swerving hard to block my path. I had to stop short, almost slammed into the hood. The door swung open and this officer, red-faced, thick neck, that look of instant authority. He barked, "You, sidewalk, now." No greeting, no context, just a command like I was already guilty of something. I pulled out my earbuds, heart rate steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, calm. Years in law enforcement teach you to keep your voice measured, to make no sudden moves. But that only works when the other person's sane enough to see you as human. He stepped in close enough that I could smell coffee and adrenaline. "I'll be the one asking questions," he said. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "Running," I said. "My name's Jordan Hayes. I live 2 miles east. I run this loop 3 times a week." He sneered like I'd told him a bad joke. "You people always got an excuse. Let me see some ID." "I don't carry a wallet when I run," I said, still calm. "You can follow me home if you need proof." That's when I saw it, that twitch in his jaw. To him, I wasn't polite, I was defiant. And in his world, that was the same thing. "No ID in my neighborhood," he said, stabbing a finger into my chest. "You think you can just walk around casing houses?" And that's the moment you realize this isn't about you anymore. You're just the canvas for someone else's hate. I said, "Officer, you're crossing a line." He smiled like that was permission. "I'll show you a line," he hissed, and before I could blink, the baton was out. First swing missed, loud crack against the pavement. Second one connected. I felt my leg buckle, a burst of light sound gone fuzzy around the edges. I dropped, teeth clenched, breath gone. His partner, younger guy, leaned against the cruiser, watching with a smirk like this was entertainment. But pain does something strange to me. It sharpens everything. I memorized that cop's face. Every line, every twitch, his nameplate. Redding. I wasn't just seeing an officer anymore. I was looking at a future defendant. A few hours later, I was sitting on a steel bench in a holding cell, leg wrapped, charged with resisting arrest and prowling. The irony almost made me laugh. They didn't even bother pretending it was real. The goal wasn't justice. It was humiliation. Teach him a lesson. I listened to them outside, the jokes, the casual racism. It wasn't new. I'd seen that kind of rot from the inside, working joint task forces, watching departments bury misconduct under mountains of paperwork. This was no bad apple. It was the whole tree. When they finally released me, the desk sergeant tossed my stuff across the counter like trash. House key, earbuds. No apology, no acknowledgement. I limped out, hailed a cab, and went home. I showered, wrapped my leg, and sat there thinking. 3 options. File a complaint with Internal Affairs, sue the city, or make a federal case out of it. Internal Affairs. Please. I knew exactly how that story ends. Some lieutenant who plays poker with the same officers on weekends will investigate, declare the complaint unsubstantiated, and everyone goes home happy. Civil suit. Sure, they'd write a check, the department's insurance would cover it, and the officer might get a short lecture about optics. But the system would stay the same. Option 3, though, that one had weight. I limped into my office, booted up my laptop, and logged into a secure DOJ portal, one most people don't even know exists. I started typing. At approximately 10:52 a.m., while engaged in personal recreation on Pinecrest Drive, I was detained and assaulted by Officer Cole Redding, badge number 533 of the Crestwood Police Department. I wrote everything. Every word he said, every swing of that baton, every slur. Attached my x-rays, the ER report, the photos. And then I added my credentials, Special Agent Jordan Hayes, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I cited the statute myself, 18 U.S.C. 8242, deprivation of rights under color of law. That's not a complaint. That's a felony. I sent it directly to the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, to someone I'd met at a conference years back. I hovered for half a second, then clicked submit. Just like that, a little file began its journey from my laptop to Washington, D.C. and I knew once it landed, nothing would be the same for that department again. Meanwhile, Crestwood PD did what it always does. Lieutenant Sandra Harper opened the complaint side and said, "Another one, huh?" She walked it over to Redding, handed it to him like a parking ticket. "Guy says you roughed him up on a jog." Redding laughed. "Resisted arrest. Lucky all he got was a bruise." "Perfect," she said. "Just make sure your reports match. You know the drill. Non-compliant, feared for my safety, all that magic language. And the body cam." "Glitched," he said, smirking. "Corrupted file." She nodded, satisfied. 2 days later, she typed up a report clearing him completely. Case closed. It would have worked too, if that DOJ envelope hadn't landed on the chief's desk the next morning. I heard about it later. Chief Lawson opening that thick cream envelope, the DOJ seal on top. The letter was direct. Federal investigation into potential violations of law by Officer Cole Redding. Victim identified as Special Agent Jordan Hayes, FBI. They demanded every record, every log, every piece of footage, including anything someone might have conveniently lost. They weren't just investigating a cop. They were coming for the whole department. By the time Harper realized what was happening, it was too late. She still thought she could control the narrative, called me in for a follow-up. She wanted to poke holes in my story, paint me as some angry troublemaker. I showed up anyway. They put me in a windowless interrogation room, her sitting across from me with her little folder, that smug smile. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I just want to clear up a few inconsistencies." "Sure," I said, opening my notebook. She asked why I was running in that neighborhood. Why not stay in my own? The implication was loud and clear. I told her, "Because I like the hills, Lieutenant. Didn't realize I needed a permit to jog there." Then she said, "Officer Redding reports you were belligerent and used profanity. You refused to identify yourself." I jotted her words down and looked up. "That's incorrect. I told him my full name. I never raised my voice. I didn't swear. He called me a filthy animal, though. Is that in his report?" Her jaw tightened. "We're here to discuss your actions, not his." Then she leaned forward. "You seem to know a lot about procedure. What do you do for a living, Mr. Hayes?" And there it was. The setup. She wanted to label me. Lawyer activist, something she could twist. I let the silence stretch, then reached into my jacket, pulled out my credential wallet and placed it on the table. Flipped it open. The room went dead quiet. The badge caught the light. She froze. "Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I said, "As I was saying, Lieutenant Officer Redding violated my civil rights and filed a false report." Officer Reed backed it up. "And your so-called investigation looks an awful lot like obstruction." She whispered, I didn't know." "That's the problem," I said. "You didn't know because you didn't look." Then I closed my wallet and told her my report's already with the Department of Justice. Expect to hear from them soon. 2 weeks later, the feds rolled in. 2 black sedans parked in front of Crestwood PD. Out stepped Rachel Park from DOJ Civil Rights, 2 FBI agents, a paralegal with a rolling case. They walked straight in with a federal warrant and took over. Their first order of business, Officer Cole Redding. He strutted in with his union rep still full of swagger. Thought it was a formality. Rachel asked him to confirm his statement, that I was belligerent, that I resisted, that he used one compliance strike. Then she turned to her agent and said, "Play it." On the big screen, his own body cam footage lit up. He tried to speak, but Rachel cut him off. "Your camera system has automatic cloud backups. You can't delete federal data, officer." And there it was. The video of him cutting me off, yelling, poking me, swinging that baton. My voice calm, his full of hate. The whole room heard it. Then Rachel paused it right on his face, eyes full of rage. "Officer," she said quietly, "show me where Agent Hayes resisted." He couldn't. His union rep just stared at the table. That was the moment his world ended. The DOJ didn't stop there. They pulled 12 years of his records, and what they found was a nightmare. 30 complaints, all dismissed. Almost 900 arrests, over 80% people of color in a mostly white city. Force used more than half the time against minorities, less than 10% against whites. The math didn't lie. And Internal Affairs Harper's emails were full of fix-it messages, coaching officers on language, pre-interviewing them to align their stories, rewriting reports. They even found drafts where younger investigators had originally marked cases sustained before Harper changed them to unfounded. It wasn't oversight, it was a cover-up factory. 6 weeks later, 2 FBI agents walked into roll call and cuffed Redding in front of everyone. "You're under arrest for violations of federal law." The room went silent. The same man who thought he was untouchable walked out past his co-workers in handcuffs. Chief Lawson and Lieutenant Harper each got target letters: cooperate or face charges. They resigned before noon. Months later, the DOJ released a report so scathing it made headlines. A 150-page breakdown of systemic racism, abuse, and cover-ups. The city signed a consent decree putting the department under federal supervision for 10 years. Body cameras upgraded again, new policies, real civilian oversight. Every case Redding ever touched got reviewed. People got released. Records cleared. For once, there was something like justice. I went back to work. No press, no spotlight. I wasn't after fame. I just wanted the system to see itself for what it had become. 6 months later, I laced up again and ran that same 5-mile loop. Legs still ached when it rained, but it held. When I turned onto Pinecrest, I saw a new patrol car parked at the curb. Young Latina officer talking to an old man handing a sticker to a kid. She looked up, saw me, and gave a small nod. I nodded back. Simple. Human. That's how it's supposed to be. There's no plaque on that sidewalk. No sign saying, "This is where everything changed." But I know. And I know that for every story like mine, there are dozens that never make it past that holding cell. The only reason mine did is because I had a badge in my pocket and people in Washington who had to listen. A lot of folks don't get that luxury. Justice isn't the handcuffs or the headlines. It's the slow, stubborn work of rebuilding trust one honest act at a time. And if you've ever seen power abused, if you've ever felt that mix of anger and helplessness, you know exactly what I mean. So tell me, what does real justice look like to you? Have you ever seen someone cross that line and thought, "That's not right"? Drop your stories in the comments. Because if we don't talk about it, nothing ever changes. And if you believe stories like this matter, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and share it. Someone out there needs to hear that the fight isn't over, and that sometimes the system can still be made to listen.